Investigators initially believed this was just another state-level criminal case, until they opened the Icloud account. And what they allegedly found inside may have changed the direction of the entire investigation. Not the crime scene, not surveillance footage, data. Terabytes of data. Messages, photos, location history, conversations stretching across months. And suddenly, a new question began circulating behind the scenes. Was this still just California's case? Or had federal prosecutors already started paying attention much earlier than anyone realized? Welcome back to Real Criminal Story, the place where we don't just revisit America's most disturbing criminal cases, but examine the details most people never see behind the investigation itself. Because sometimes, the most unsettling part of a case isn't found at the scene. It's hidden inside the data. Today's story begins with a Tesla left parked for days outside a rental property in the Hollywood Hills. At first, nobody believed it would become a case potentially drawing federal attention, until investigators started piecing together the timeline. And little by little, the fragments began forming something far more disturbing than anyone originally imagined. At the center of the investigation is 21-year-old David Anthony Burke, who is currently facing multiple serious charges in California connected to the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Burke has pleaded not guilty, and under the American legal system, every defendant is presumed innocent unless proven guilty in court. That principle remains critical throughout this case. But what makes this investigation different is what prosecutors claim they discovered inside the digital evidence. According to publicly released court filings, investigators believe Burke and the victim were involved in a secret relationship that allegedly continued over an extended period of time. But then, the case became even more complicated, because prosecutors allege the victim may have wanted to expose that relationship. And if that claim is true, it could completely reshape the prosecution's theory of motive. But this is where the internet really began paying attention. Investigators reportedly seized a massive amount of digital evidence connected to cloud accounts and electronic devices. Not a few gigabytes, terabytes. A number large enough to make even former federal prosecutors stop and ask questions. Why would a local homicide investigation require that level of digital analysis? And then, another detail surfaced. Wiretaps. 54 search warrants. 54. That's not a number commonly associated with an ordinary investigation, especially one that initially appeared to be a state-level homicide case. So what exactly were investigators searching for? A former federal prosecutor who later analyzed the case made a particularly striking observation. He explained that simply storing and transmitting data through cloud services and the internet could potentially establish a federal nexus. At first, that sounds highly technical, but the implications behind it are enormous, because it means a case taking place entirely inside California could still attract federal interest simply because of how modern technology works. And if that's true, everything changes. Not just the investigation, but sentencing exposure, prosecution strategy, jurisdiction, everything. But perhaps the most unsettling part of this entire story isn't what has already been made public. It's what hasn't. According to the former prosecutor, investigators have allegedly reviewed only a portion of the digital evidence collected so far, which means there could still be massive amounts of unreleased information sitting inside those files. And that's when this case begins to feel very different. No longer just like a criminal investigation, but more like a dark room where every door investigators open reveals another hidden layer underneath. Prosecutors have also referenced interstate travel, extended communication over many months, and digital evidence that allegedly suggests the relationship continued even after prior attention from authorities. At first glance, those details may sound secondary, but to federal investigators, the movement of a minor across state lines within the context of an allegedly illegal relationship can dramatically change the legal landscape of a case. And that's when another term quietly entered the conversation: the Mann Act. A federal law historically connected to several controversial criminal cases throughout American history. But this is where things become even more confusing. As of today, there has been no official confirmation that the FBI is publicly involved in the investigation. No joint press conference, no federal announcement, no FBI logo standing behind a podium. Nothing. And yet, many legal analysts believe that silence means very little. Because in major American investigations, the public often doesn't learn the true scale of what's happening until much later, sometimes months later, sometimes years, and sometimes only after prosecutors finally decide to move. So tonight, many questions still remain unanswered. Will additional charges eventually appear? Will the digital evidence strengthen the prosecution's case or complicate it? Is this truly still just a state-level investigation? Or has the story already become much larger than the public currently understands? Maybe that's what makes this case so haunting to so many people following it online. Not just the allegations themselves, but the growing feeling that somewhere inside the missing pieces of the timeline, inside the deleted messages, inside the terabytes of untouched data, there may still be an entire part of the story the public hasn't seen yet.